Walk all over the city with an empty baby carriage. What am I doing? What are your feelings when you are watching me walking? No matter view from which angle, walking with an empty baby carriage just makes no sense at all. I know you're confused, but just take a minute and imagine yourself doing this. When you devote yourself into this meaningless action, when you ignore the looks of neighbors and passers-by, just walking straight through. Do I look too self-absorbed? Will I be seen by my friends and colleagues? There are worries and doubts that loom, but to carry on. You don't have logic to explain, but gradually you would find a sense of meaning, an obscure, looming sense of meaning. You cannot name it immediately, but to know it's there. If it still feels too hard, maybe just recall your feeling when you are watching me walking. What are the questions that you have asked your mind? What are the answers that you have given to yourself? All these actions of walking with an empty baby carriage, questions that you have asked in your mind, and answers you have given to yourself resemble the act of reading literature. The creation, interpretation, and also the presentation of literature. Literature? How could you heard of something so useless in the city of Shenzhen? But firstly, believe it or not, what I have just done is a poem. This is City Piece, one of the poetic rituals by multimedia artist Yoko Ono. Some of you may have even heard of this artist. But still, literature. This word may sound a little bit unfamiliar here. It is not a secret that Shenzhen is sometimes joked as the city with least literary association. Seems that literature is immediately associated with pages emitting the scent of history, all those thee and thou. Seems that literature is immediately associated with kind of introverted, romantic, but mad people writing about beautiful things that are hard to understand. Seems that literature is immediately associated with reading with a cup of coffee. It is also very widely said that literature has declined. We do talk about soap dramas instead of classical works. We do apply for STEM majors instead of English literature. We do talk about how bookstores are struggling to survive. But why? Why literature receives so little attention in our era? Is it just because it has no use and does not make a fortune? Is it just because many of its functions, such as meeting with other cultures, can be easily replaced by social reviews? But take a minute to think of this. Literature may not be limited to what we assume it is. Literature can be very related to our city. The decline of public attention does not mean that literature itself has declined. Literature can be our city. So, what does literature related to our city looks like? If I say this is how it looks, you may frown at it. But just take a second and read a few more. Again, before I introduce the work and the writer, what are your feelings when you look at this? Some of you may even doubt, is this literature? Is this even writing? This is Prose Architectures by Renee Gluman. You can see how these writings are in the shapes of architectures. According to Renee Gluman's official website, she's doing a kind of writing that is also drawing. In the introduction of Prose Architectures, Renee explains that drawing allows her to write in a synchronous way. It allows her to move along her thoughts rather than being dragged by grammar and syntax. She's capturing the experience of literature that cannot be named with language. But why this experience of literature is captured in the form of architectures? Why prose architectures? Why not just prose drawings? And Renee's answer would be, the experience of literature she's capturing is the most central to her thinking and living, and that was the city. It is the collective thinking and language habits shared by every single individual living in the city. This is what makes literature. Our experience of literature is built on our experience of the city. Yes, we can read literature in Shenzhen, and we can read Shenzhen in literature, and we can read it in a kind of language that is not necessarily language. Think about the traffic noises you hear on Shennan Road. Think about the construction sites you hear in Qiaoxiang. Think about the multiple texture, mixed color plastic packages you see on the shelves of Walmart. A rising star of contemporary literature, Sally Rooney, uses the form of social media chat in her book, Conversations with Friends. These are our city lives. Contemporary literature, with their shattered grammar, cross-media presentations, and indefinite themes and genres, are honestly depicting our city lives in such cacophony. Writings such as prose architectures and Conversations with Friends may seem unconventional at first glance. We doubt whether they are literature. But such confusions are because we are so used to the notion that literature is separate from reality. We assume that there's a line drawn between literature and reality, and this line is highlighted by the kind of language we don't use in daily life. We may be thinking about the kind of language we use in high school literature classes, quote-unquote, the best literary ability of many of us. But literature is able to record what we see, hear, and touch in our city. Literature can be very accessible and related if we merge it with our city. So now we know what literature related to our city look like. But still, why do we need literature? Especially in a highly digitalized city in Shenzhen, seems that literature is of very utilitarian value. But such lack of value is exactly literature's advantage. When reading literature, we are reading our minds from within. Our minds are fluid. Our minds are complex. Our minds are not formulas. We are not machines. We think, we dream, and we stare at a wall. There are so many thoughts that are unnamed by logic, unnamed by genre, unnamed by terms. All such chaos is literature's advantage. Literature deals with the unnamed. Literature deals with the undefined. In a young and creative city like Shenzhen, we are always open to the undefined. It is such openness to the undefined that allows us to embrace our city lives in constant change and constant development. If we hold on to the formulas, the defined, how can we look into the future? If we don't examine ourselves, how can we know our potentials? Literature is an immersive experience. It is an experience just as living in the city. We know that we do judge a book by its cover. It is hard for us to buy a book without it saying that it will change our lives and help us earn more on the book cover. But non-utilitarian reading is reading for ourselves. We are reading ourselves shaped by our city and how we can shape our city in return. Borrowing from Renee's quote again, we are reading the most central to our thinking and living, and that was the city, our different, unique, but collective thinking and living in the city. We all know that we could learn the core messages of a book in 5 minutes through a summary. But literature is more than those core messages. Reading is more than those core messages. We don't always receive clear and convincing answers for why we read, just as we don't always receive such answers for why we live. We don't know why we walk over the city with an empty baby carriage. But instead of asking why, we shall ask, why not? Literature is an experience, but at the same time, it is an experiment of our minds and our lives. So, why don't we give it a try? Thank you.